Good day. Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter, was one of my favorite games as a kid, and when I started up a YouTube channel, it was the fourth game I ever reviewed, and I happened to review that game way back in 2009. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a look at it again, because it is a game that embodies the concepts of what AAA used to mean. AAA used to mean innovation, experimentation, and imagination. So, with that in mind, today we're going to take a look at Night Dive's remaster of Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter.
Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter was developed by Iguana Entertainment and published by Acclaim Entertainment for the Nintendo 64 on March 4th, 1997. Turok would later receive a PC port on November 26th, 1997, and the version of the game we'll be looking at today is the Night Dive remaster, and that was published on December 17th, 2015 for the PC and all modern consoles. Funny enough, the Mac version of the remaster was published on February 23rd, my birthday, 2016. Since I'm not a hipster, I'm gonna be skipping that version. The last version to be released would be the PlayStation 4 version, which will be released in 2021. While I love my old N64 cartridge, I definitely recommend playing the Night Dive remaster because it gives you increased screen resolution, better frame rate, modern controls, and expands the levels a little bit here and there. It updates the game while keeping what made Turok great intact. What's kind of funny is I turn my nose up at this remaster thinking that N64 version is fine. But I gotta say, this remaster is pretty much the definitive Turok the Dinosaur Hunter experience. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter was both the first game I ever saw advertised for the N64 and the first game I ever played for the N64. I still remember to this very day seeing a commercial for the game on TV and complaining to my grandfather about how it wasn't on PC. How little did I know, but in the 90s it was hard to know what was coming out, especially if you were a kid. Well, in 97, my family rented, because yeah, you could do that back then, both the N64 console and the game from Blockbuster, and I got hooked. Come Christmas 1998, Santa smiled upon me and delivered the plutonium purple N64 and Turok 2. And this is kind of jumping the gun here a bit, but on that Christmas, my grandfather downloaded and printed out a walkthrough for Turok 2 since that game was so convoluted. And that was a pretty big deal back in the late 90s. But anyway, back to Turok 1. It wouldn't be until 99 that I would own the game outright, and I paid, with my own money that is, the then princely sum of 40 bucks for just the bare cartridge. And I still have that cartridge to this very day. So what the hell is Turok? Turok, the Dinosaur Hunter, is a hub-based first-person shooter that combines exploration and platforming with awesome shooting combat. The combat for Turok is quick and brutal, and the game throws a good number of varied and complex enemies at you. Some poor sods have bloody femur bones, and some have phased plasma pulse rifles in the 50-watt range. And those plasma guys are bad underscore ass. They have armor that allows them to tank a few hits, and their plasma blasts hurt, and they shoot them remarkably fast. Then you got the dinosaurs. You'll primarily be facing raptors. However, in Turok lore, these are called Bionosaurs. These guys take a good amount of hits to take down, but a 12-gauge shotgun blast to the face will calm even the mightiest of beasts. The Bionosaur also shows up with a plasma rifle grafted to its arm. And yes, it's just as awesome as it sounds, and it hurts just as much as it sounds too. In addition to the Bionosaur, you also have to fight Dimetrodons. They come in two flavors, one without guns and one with guns. The one with guns is pretty difficult to defeat, but thankfully by late game you'll have a lot of powerful weapons, so that evens up the odds a little bit. The most badass enemy in the game is the bloody Scarab Beetle. This thing will track you down through an entire level. I saw one of these things crawling up the side of a mountain looking for Turok's rock hard flesh. The difficulty for the enemies is a perfect blend of challenge and fun. You can slaughter weak, bone-wielding enemies in one hit, but as you progress through the levels, you'll end up facing harder enemies, and you'll really have to start thinking about how to defeat them. The game will throw a couple of bullet sponges at you here and there, but this game, like Quake 2, will always give you the tools to fight. Big monkey with a flamethrower strapped to his arm shows up. The game spawns you some exploding arrows to even the odds. The game never feels unfair, nor do the levels get bogged down with hard to kill enemies. The entire game has that awesome id-tickling flow that id Software pulled off so very well in Doom and Quake 2. The game features 4 bosses: the Long Hunter, oh my, the giant praying mantis, the big ass T-Rex, and the Campaigner. The Long Hunter and the Campaigner were both villains from the Turok comic. The Long Hunter is the first boss you have to take down and will be by far the hardest, since you will be at your weakest at this point. Hell, even getting to him is tough as you have to navigate these platforms, and if you lose all your lives, and you won't have many at this point, you will go back to the save shrine and then have to navigate them all over again. The rest of the bosses, while cool, are easier, since by that time you will have a lot better tools to defeat them and more lives, and the save shrines are usually right outside the boss arena. And I think the devs could have balanced the later bosses a little better so that they would all be a major challenge. The tools you'll be using to demote the bosses to worm food are as follows. You got your kick-ass badass knife. You can use this to gut the hapless trash mobs and will be the only weapon you can use underwater. The knife is pretty fun and visceral weapon to use, and is a good weapon to use to save on ammo. Then you got the bow. This is based on the bow that Turok had in the comic. In the comic, his mighty bow was forged for him by the enigmatic Mother God, and can shoot both regular arrows and explosive ones. And that carries over to the game. You won't need to shoot regular arrows, as you will not run out of your regular bullet ammo, but you will be using what the game called tech arrows. These are awesomely exploding arrows that do more damage than the rocket, it seems, and these will be very useful for taking down heavy enemies and whittling down bosses' health. The first gun you get is the venerable Beretta 92. This will allow you to take on weak range enemies and keep the dinosaurs at a good distance, and will be useful late game when you want to conserve bullets. Then you got the shotgun, and this is my favorite pump action shotgun model of all time. This is based on an Ithaca pump gun and is a good shotgun to use when you want to conserve ammo. Then you got the auto shotgun, and this can chew through your ammo fast, but it's devastating when it comes to close encounters of the Cenozoic kind. You can get explosive shells, and this is one area that Turok 2 improved upon. In Turok 1, you could not switch between ammo types, so you gotta shoot up one or the other, which means the shotty will be unavailable for a bit, as you will want to keep the exploding shots for the big boys. But that ain't too bad, because then you got the AK-47. Although the model looks like an unholy amalgamation of M14 and FAL, thankfully, it's good regardless. You fire in 3-round bursts that, while crap in real life, it's good for taking down all the weak trash mobs and even dinosaurs. But it's not that useful for the big boys, especially the plasma dudes, as those guys will take a few bursts to take down and they will hurt you all the while. Then you got old Painless, the minigun. It is the coolest minigun model ever and uses its own ammo pool and is good for taking down enemies both large and small, but due to the other weapons being so good, it might go unused. Later in the game, you will get the grenade launcher. Getting the grenades to go where you want is a little hard, but it's good for big boys and bosses. After you defeat the Long Hunter, you'll pick up his plasma rifle, and this is a good go-to gun for the entire game, as you can use it on trash mobs and the plasma boys, and it's good for whittling down bosses. It looks and sounds oh so sexy. There are 2 other weapons that use the energy cells that the plasma rifle uses. You have what the game calls the alien weapon, aka Mantis Blaster, and then you got what I call the Mr. Freeze gun. You guessed it, freezes enemies. Neither of these weapons do enough damage to be worth using, so save your cells for a real gun. Your last normal weapon is the rocket launcher, and is good for taking down the big boys. Lastly, you got the boss killer weapons, the fusion cannon and the chronoceptor. The fusion cannon, aka the end of the world gun, is a great boss buster, and never use it for anything but it is very impressive when you let it off the chain. And finally, you got the chronoceptor. The chronoceptor ties into the exploration gameplay, you don't just find it, instead you gotta collect a certain number of pieces to build it. And it's very easy to miss those pieces, and to be honest, you don't really need it, as the end of the world gun and exploding 12-gauge shells do more than enough damage to the bosses and regular enemies. The weapons in Turok are my second favorite weapons of all time. Second only to Quake 2's, that is. They all look great with nice and distinct and well-detailed designs. They're not so powerful as to make combat trivial, and not so weak as to make combat a meat fest. They let you get to the combat groove that only the very few high-tier first-person shooters ever get right. The enemies will respawn now and again, and apparently with the Night Dive remaster, the enemy respawn rate is higher than it was in the original game and the original PC port, but this never gave me that much trouble. This game does not have regenerative health, and it does not even have a quick save system. The health in this game is fair. Your enemies can do non-trivial amounts of damage, but you won't turn corners and get evaporated either. It's just hard enough to be the right kind of fun challenge. In the remaster and the N64 game, you have checkpoints and save shrines, and both tie into the live system. Yeah, lives can be a drag, I know mine can be, but this system is actually pretty slick. When you have lives, you can die and come back at a checkpoint. When you lose all your lives, you will come back at a save shrine. You collect life points to increase your lives, and it's not that hard to max them out. The game has plenty of checkpoints and save shrines that this live system makes the game even more fun as it ramps up the challenge just a little bit and makes you really try not to die and makes death just a little more painful. While continuing can be a little rough, it's never enough to make you throw the control down and say screw the game. The devs wanted you to have fun and not get pissed off. There are a few items to be found, such as spiritual invincibility, that makes the game go all disco looking and everything moves really slow. I think this is supposed to be some kind of magic, but I can't help but think that old Turok here smoked a whole bunch of peyote. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is structured around exploration. The game is divided into 9 massive levels. In each level, you'll have to find a certain number of keys to then unlock the next level. The game will not tell you where they are, so you must scour the entire level to find them. Thankfully, this game does not get nearly as bad as Heretic or Hexen, but some of the keys can be kind of hard to find. The game loves to leave a few out in plain sight, but it will be up to you to hunt down the rest. The game does give you a good map, so we'll at least know where you have been, and if you keep going to the unfilled parts of the map, you will eventually find all the keys. The keys never get so hard to find that you will find yourself consulting a walkthrough, and I'm not even a hardcore gamer by any means, and I found all the bloody things. Little portals will pop up now and again, and these portals drop you in bonus rooms that allow you to stock up on some goodies. Now, these bonus portals are not all random, and eventually you'll find yourself coming to portals that you've already looted. It's an awesome concept that was sadly not continued in the later Turok games. In theory, the whole game being one large key hunt should be boring, or at least get old after a while. But, and this is a nice curvaceous bum, you are collecting keys for a purpose. You gotta get all the keys to get to the final boss and beat the game. So each key you collect is in service to the greater whole, and thus the game never gets tedious, and it never feels like you're just doing the same thing over and over again. The last element of the gameplay is the platforming. Turok, he a thick boy, and when he jumps, he falls with style. First-person platforming is very hard to get right, but the boys at Iguana did the impossible and made the platforming as fun as the rest of the gameplay. The controls are not slippery or floaty, and when you jump, you can tell where you're going to fall, and most of the time, you'll be able to jump with certainty, and I found myself falling to my death only a few times throughout the course of a playthrough. All these gameplay elements add up to a whole that blew everyone's mind back in the 90s, and oh yes, it still holds up even today. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is a major evolution in gaming. It combined a few elements that had come before. Essentially, you had the fast-paced gameplay of Doom with the exploration of Heretic and Hexen, and then you have platforming that actually works. Turok is my 4th favorite first-person shooter and is in the top 20 Alpha Primaris games. It is a game that never gets old, and one that I love as much today as I did back in the 90s. Hell, I might even love it even more now. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is a complete game. A complete game is one where there are few, if any, flaws, and each aspect of the game is standout and iconic in its own right. Now, graphically, the game blew me away in the 90s, and the Night Dive remaster makes the game look even better. The textures were nothing short of astounding in 1997, and remember, it had only been 5 years since Wolfenstein 3D. Each level in the game looked distinct, and the enemies had a great variety as well. The weapon models were very well detailed, both on the ground and in Turok's hands, and Turok himself looked amazing as well. In 2024, I gotta say the game still holds up, and we aren't looking at horrible polygons like in Quake 1. The animations, while simple, are still pretty good, and once again, better than Quake's. Sound design is iconic, and everything sounds memorable, from the basic button presses to the death sounds of the enemies. The death sounds of the enemies are hardcore, but just funny enough to not be psychotic. There is exactly one voice line in the game. The Long Hunter says, "Hey," and it's done well enough. Since this is a game from the late 90s, we've got such high quality beats that we even have a special underwater song, and this has got to be my single favorite song from the entire game. You almost want to just go underwater just to hear the bloody thing. The story for Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is pretty clever. It's deeper than you would think. Even though there are no text screens or cutscenes or anything that tells you about what is going on, you can pretty much infer what is happening just by reading the title. You're a guy named Turok, and you're a dinosaur hunter. Life, finds a way to get in front of Turok's AK. As you progress through the game, you can infer what's going on from the level titles and from how the level is structured. Essentially, Turok is going on a one badass mission to fight evil cyborgs and dinosaurs. Now, the deep lore for Turok can be found in the comic of the same name. Turok as a concept came onto the scene in the 1950s, and this 1950s comic showed the Native American Turok as a heroic and honorable hero and set up key pillars of what Turok would later become. And despite being a comic from the 50s, Turok was still a kick-ass hero and even shot a bunch of dinosaurs with his bow. In the 90s, a comics company was set up by a guy named Jim Shooter. He was originally an editor at Marvel and is the man to thank for all those really kick-ass Marvel comics of the 1980s. Funny enough, he almost bought out Marvel when they were having some financial difficulties and only missed out by $1 million. If only he could have got it. In any event, he set up a comics company himself called Valiant Comics. Valiant Comics was a comic company that resurrected old 50s heroes and brought in a few new ones, and eventually meshed them all into one universe. Turok would make his 90s debut in the Magnus the Robot Fighter comic as part of the Valiant Unity event. First, who the hell even is Turok? Turok the Dinosaur Hunter in the Valiant Comics continuity, and I would presume this game, is a Kiowa Apache warrior from the late 19th century. He is known as Turok, Son of Stone, mainly because he's a hard-ass, but a hard-ass with a good heart, and is a stalwart and valiant warrior that punishes the guilty and defends the innocent. Turok is a good guy, a straight hero classic, but if you mess with him, he gonna shoot you with an arrow or stab you with his knife, or potentially just kick the crap out of you. He ends up in the Lost Land, a land that sits outside of time and thus has no beginning or ending. This is how you get the dinosaurs and people from the future all inhabiting the same time and world. He gets there by falling through a random portal, and while there, he kind of falls in with a bad crowd led by a crazy-ass bitch named Mother God. She is not an eldritch abomination, rather she is a superpowered woman named Erica Pierce, who is from the Solar Man of the Atom comic. Ugh, bloody comics. You never know what's going on. There's stuff going in all these things. Anyway, moving on. She wants to unify the Lost Land under her benevolent rule, and Turok is taken in by her sexiness, but eventually learns that killing people in the name of a crazed lunatic is bad, and if you do that, you're bad, okay? So he gets over that and fights against Mother God, and the Lost Land kind of gets blown up, and then he's spat out into the 90s, where he has to acclimate to this new world. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, the comic, lasts 48 issues, and all that Mother God stuff was all part of a major comic event that didn't even take place in Turok proper, and was a much better story than what Turok's actual comic gives us. And if you just pick up Turok issue 1, you will learn about this awesome event where Turok falls to the dark side and redeems himself in a flashback. The comic itself has Turok deal with being a man out of time, which is kind of compelling, but that is only really paid lip service to, and most of the time, Turok is on regular Earth and not the much more interesting Lost Land. The early story arcs are not bad. Turok has to fight a Bionosaur named Monarch, And no, Monarch is not a T-Rex. Instead, he is a raptor. The raptors in the game are based upon his design. In addition to Monarch, Turok fights with the Long Hunter, and Long Hunter is a recurring villain, and we never get any sort of payoff between the two. Most of the comic just meanders from story arc to story arc with no point, but it wasn't all bad. Eventually, Turok was called on to fight a cocaine-addicted Tyrannosaurus Rex. You think Cocaine Bear was scary? The game takes place about midway into the comic's run, where Turok finally goes back to the Lost Land and has to fight a guy named the Campaigner. The Campaigner is trying to unify the Lost Land, and Turok has to stop him, because in order to unify the Lost Land, the Campaigner is basically killing anyone who resists his rule. What should be a major event in the Turok comic is over and done with in just a couple issues, and it left me wanting more. Thankfully, the game does not suffer from that problem. With all that in mind, you start the game at Turok's campsite and have to fight your way to the hub ruins. Once there, you will see several portals, and this is your lot. Collect the keys to activate the portals, and eventually you make it to the Campaigner. Each level in the game is huge and filled with really cool level architecture and has got a lot of verticality. And my favorite level is the Treetop Village. You gotta ascend a bunch of stairs and climb up a big-ass tree, and this is, in my opinion, the most impressive level in the game. The levels in this game are all 100% excellent, and there is no level that stands out as the bad one, and each level will give you a unique and fun challenge. And thankfully, the pace of the game never lags. In level 8, you fight the T-Rex, and all throughout the game you'll be hearing his bellows of rage. He has a laser eye and flame breath. The game names this guy Thunder the T-Rex. Thankfully for the player, Thunder the T-Rex is a bloody narc and chose to stay on the straight and narrow path, and thus he does not get hopped up on cocaine before the final battle with Turok, thus making it a pretty easy fight. When you finally face the Campaigner, you will have to use your explodey shells to take him down, because if you try to blast him with the Phase Plasma Pulse Rifle, he magically takes them from you and then kicks you in the crotch. Once you defeat the Campaigner, the base explodes, and Turok runs and jumps into some conveniently placed water, and the game ends. So, who the hell was the Campaigner anyway? The game doesn't tell you, but in the comic, the Campaigner was a robot from the Magnus the Robot Fighter comic that had been brought to the Lost Land by Mother God and given a soul. And apparently after getting a soul, the robot became evil and wanted to conquer the universe, whatever. And hell, even Merlin showed up in that comic to tell that Turok had to find his destiny. As you would expect, he never did. And sadly, Turok never got any payoff in his comic, so in my headcanon, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter the game is the penultimate end of the Turok storylines. The game did well and spawned 2 sequels that were kick-ass, but they took place in a different continuity altogether, and those stories shall be told.
So yeah, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter has really managed to stand the test of time. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is one of those games that just never really gets old, and really has just kind of gotten sweeter with time. Now, if like me, you've kind of forgot about Turok a little bit, it's time to get that night diversion and get back into the Lost Land. And so, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Turok 2 and good Turok 3. Finally, that bloody thing got remastered, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.